In the heart of a raging Minnesota blizzard, war veteran Logan Carter opens his cabin door to a trail of blood and finds a tiny black creature trembling in the snow. Thinking it's just a lost puppy, he wraps it in his coat, warming it by the fire. The same hands that once saved soldiers now fight to save one fragile life. But as days pass, the creature grows stronger, faster, its amber eyes glowing with something wild, something ancien. What began as an act of kindness becomes a test of faith and courage. Because this puppy isn't a dog at all, but a miracle sent to heal a broken man's soul. Snow fell in rhythmic sheets over the pine ridges east of Duluth, Minnesota, each gust singing against the cabin's wooden frame like a slow, patient drum. Inside, Logan Carter sat by the window, one hand resting on his German shepherd's back, the other wrapped around a chipped mug of black coffee gone cold an hour ago. Logan was 41, a former Army medic whose broad shoulders carried the quiet gravity of a man who had seen too much and spoken too little since. His face was lined not just by age, but by memory, thin scars tracing across his cheek from shrapnel long removed, gray beginning to invade his short brown hair. He kept his beard trimmed but not neat, as though control were something he practiced but no longer worshipped. His eyes, once sharp with the alertness of battle, had settled into that gray-blue stillness soldiers get when the war refuses to end inside them. Beside him, Rex, his German shepherd, shifted his weight, the thick winter coat shimmering amber and black under the lamplight. Rex was 5 years old, large but lean, a military-trained K9 who had retired with Logan after the third tour in Afghanistan. The dog carried himself with a calm vigilance, never restless, never idle. Even at rest, his gaze scanned the windows and doors like a living radar. He was more than a companion. He was the last tether to the rhythm of a life that made sense, where duty was simple and loyalty came with a uniform. Outside, the storm was swallowing the night whole. Then came a sound, a faint thud against the porch, muffled by snow. Rex's ears flicked, and he stood, muscles coiled. Logan set down the mug, that medic instinct waking in him like an old reflex. When he opened the door, a blade of wind cut through the stillness, carrying a swirl of white and something darker. A trail of blood, thin but deliberate, wound from the edge of the tree line toward his steps. At its end, huddled against the porch boards, was a small black shape barely larger than his glove. The creature trembled, fur matted with frost, its breaths shallow as if the cold had stolen its rhythm. Logan knelt, his boots sinking into the drift. "Easy there," he murmured, the same tone he had used with dying soldiers on desert nights. Rex lowered his head, nose twitching, then gave a low, uncertain whine, not of threat, but of pity. The thing looked like a puppy, maybe a shepherd mix, but smaller, weaker, its paws oddly large for such a tiny body. It was half buried in snow, one side crusted with ice. Logan reached out, gloved fingers trembling not from the cold, but from the echo of something deeper, memory of holding things that stopped breathing in his arms. "Not tonight," he whispered, voice roughened by silence. He tucked the creature into his flannel shirt, felt a faint heartbeat fluttering against his chest. The warmth of life, fragile, defiant, pressed against the scars over his ribs. He slammed the door shut and staggered back to the stove. The cabin came alive in practiced urgency. He threw logs into the firebox, rolled towels, and set a small basin of warm water on the table. Rex stood close, nose brushing Logan's arm as if reminding him to keep steady. Steam rose from the water as Logan rubbed the creature gently, working to coax the cold out of its limbs. Under the frost, its coat was black as coal, so dark it seemed to swallow the light. Its eyes were sealed shut. Its breaths came in stutters. But it was fighting. God, it was fighting. "Come on, little guy," Logan muttered, pressing a hand to its tiny chest. "You've made it this far?" He found canned milk in the pantry, mixed it with warm water, and used a dropper to feed the creature. The room smelled of smoke, pine, and old hope. The storm clawed at the windows, but in here, life clawed back. Rex watched, head tilted, tail motionless, his amber eyes full of comprehension no human could fake. For a long while there was nothing but the sound of fire and breath, the steady return of a rhythm Logan thought he'd lost. The creature whimpered once, then twice, curling into a nest of towels. Logan leaned back in his chair, exhaustion finally catching him. He stared at the rising and falling of that tiny chest until sleep stole his vigilance. When the gray light of morning crept through the frosted window, Logan woke to find Rex sitting beside the stove, guarding the bundle like a soldier on watch. The storm had passed, leaving the world outside bright and cruelly still. Logan rubbed his eyes, his joints stiff, and looked down. The creature was breathing evenly now, tiny paws twitching as if it dreamed of running through snow. "Looks like you're staying," Logan said softly. Rex's tail thumped once in agreement. By noon, Logan wrapped the pup in his old army blanket and drove into town. The snowplows had barely carved through the roads, and the windshield wipers groaned against the frost. Duluth was quiet, a winter city in slow motion, the world painted white and silver. The veterinary clinic was a small brick building at the edge of downtown. Inside, Dr. Emily Carter, a woman in her mid-50s with streaks of silver through her auburn hair, looked up from a desk cluttered with paperwork. Emily was tall, sharp-featured but kind-eyed, with the calm authority of someone who had spent decades coaxing life back into fragile bodies. She adjusted her glasses, eyes narrowing as she spotted the shivering bundle in Logan's arms. "Found him out in the storm?" she asked. Her voice had that northern steadiness, gentle but unshakable. "Yeah," Logan said, his tone clipped from habit. "Barely breathing. Thought it was a shepherd pup." Emily's gloved hands were deft, professional. "Maybe," she murmured, examining the paws. "Though these are big." She weighed it carefully, checked its gums, ears, and pulse. 2 weeks old, malnourished but responsive. Could be shepherd, maybe husky in the mix. She looked up. "He'll need warmth, formula, and attention every 4 hours. That's not an easy job, Mr. Carter," he said. "Logan Carter." Her eyebrow rose. "Another Carter in my office? We might be cousins." She smiled thinly. "You live alone?" He nodded once. "Well, you won't anymore," she said, scribbling notes and sliding over a small bottle of antibiotics. "If you can handle feeding schedules, he'll make it. Big commitment, though." Logan paused, looking down at the sleeping pup, its head resting against his hand. "I've handled worse," he said. For the first time in months, something in his chest felt unburdened. On the drive home, he talked to Rex and the pup as if to himself. "See that ridge, Rex? That's where the eagles nest. We'll take him there when he's strong." The pup stirred at his voice. Rex glanced from the passenger seat, ears tilted, as if amused by the promise. Back at the cabin, Logan settled the tiny creature beside the stove again. Snowlight spilled through the window, painting the room in soft white. He could feel something changing in the air, small but certain. This was not just rescue, it was resurrection. The storm outside had ended, but for the first time in years, Logan's heart no longer echoed with the days after the storm fell into a rhythm that felt almost like healing. The cabin, once quiet enough for Logan Carter to hear his own heartbeat echo against the walls, now carried new sounds. The soft scratching of claws on wood, the rustle of blankets, the low rumble of Rex's protective growl when the wind rattled the windows. Logan had built his life on order, on the kind of discipline that kept men alive overseas. Wake at dawn, check the perimeter, maintain the tools. Now, that discipline was reawakening, redirected toward the fragile creature he had pulled from the snow. Shadow, as he'd come to call the pup, ate every 4 hours and slept between Rex's paws like a black ember in the ashes of the fireplace glow. It was strange to Logan how quickly his instincts shifted from survival to nurturing. He'd spent years patching up soldiers and then spent more years failing to patch up himself. His hands, once used to stop bleeding, now measured formula, adjusted towels, and traced tiny ribs under soft fur. Every night, he wrote in a small notebook, 2 Oz formula. 3 kAm feeding successful, weight improving, movement stable. The soldier in him documented everything, as if the creature's progress might somehow rewrite the history of loss etched in his bones. Rex had accepted the newcomer without question. There was no jealousy in him, no restlessness. He seemed to understand the pup was fragile, something that required vigilance. Sometimes, when Logan stirred awake from a nightmare, drenched in cold sweat, Rex would be there, muzzle resting on his chest, and Shadow would be curled against his neck, the steady rhythm of 2 living beings anchoring him to the present. Those moments were a kind of therapy no doctor in the veterans' hospital had ever managed to prescribe. By the second week, Shadow's eyes opened fully, revealing irises the color of molten gold. Too bright, too steady for a normal dog. The vet, Dr. Emily Carter, had warned him that the pup would grow fast, but even she couldn't have predicted the speed. Shadow's paws seemed almost comically large for his body, but his movements were already precise, deliberate. He didn't stumble or wobble like most pups. When Logan called his name, Shadow responded, not by simple recognition, but with awareness, as if he understood more than he should. The snow outside had hardened to a glittering crust, and Logan began to take both dogs on short walks through the woods that bordered his property. The forest behind the cabin was dense with pine and birch, the air sharp and clean, the silence deeper than any chapel. Rex walked on Logan's left, Shadow on his right, the pup's small legs working double time to keep up. Each step pressed prints into the untouched snow, 2 large, 1 small, side by side. Logan found himself talking aloud again, narrating their walks the way he used to brief medics on patrol routes. See that ridge, Rex? That's where the elk cross. And that stream, frozen now, but in spring you'll hear it roar. It wasn't really for the dogs, it was for him. Words kept the ghosts quiet. One morning, while at the grocery store in town, Logan ran into Tom Henderson, his closest neighbor, though close in Duluth's northern woods, meant 15 miles apart. Tom was 60, broad in the shoulders and grizzled like an old oak. His beard was salt and pepper, and his skin had the reddish tone of someone who'd lived half his life outdoors. He'd been a sheriff once, before a hunting accident claimed the use of 2 fingers on his left hand. Now he lived off retirement checks and kept an unofficial watch on the scattered hermits of the county. "Hell, Carter," Tom greeted him, his voice gravelly but warm. "Didn't expect to see you off that mountain of yours. Heard the blizzard tried to take you. Almost did, Logan said, grabbing a can of soup from the shelf. Found something out there. A pup. A pup, huh? Tom's eyes softened. That explains why I heard barking through the wind last night. You feeding strays now? Logan smirked faintly. Feeding one? He's different. How so? He's small but already strong. Smart. Too smart. Doc Carter says maybe Shepherd Husky. Could be anything. Doesn't matter. He's staying. Tom nodded slowly. You always did have a soft spot for the broken ones. His tone wasn't judgmental, just matter of fact. If you need supplies, you know I've got extras. Appreciate it, Logan said, meaning it. He had never been good at friendship, but Tom's blunt kindness felt like an anchor in a world still sliding. By the third week, the cabin no longer felt like an outpost. It felt like a home. The daily regimen was still military, but softer now. Morning feed, afternoon play, evening patrol. Shadow had grown nearly twice his size from when Logan found him. His fur sleek and dark as wet coal. His gait was silent, almost eerie, and his intelligence unmistakable. He learned to open the porch latch by watching Rex do it once. He learned where the food was stored, and when Logan scolded him, he would tilt his head and stare with a patience that bordered on human. One night, after feeding the fire, Logan sat at the table flipping through an old photo album. Pictures of his unit stared back, young faces frozen in dust and sun. You'd have liked them, he told Rex quietly. They were loyal. His hand drifted to Shadow's head, scratching behind an ear. Like you. For a moment, the cabin felt too still, and he felt the weight of what he'd lost. The brothers buried overseas, the purpose left behind. Then Shadow stirred, pressed his head against Logan's hand, and Rex thumped his tail on the floor. The sound broke the heaviness like light through storm clouds. It wasn't long before another strange thing began to happen. At dusk, when the sky bruised purple and the frost glittered like scattered glass, Shadow would stop mid-play, ears perked toward the woods. His muscles would tense, eyes narrowing into the tree line. Rex noticed it too, standing alert beside him, not barking, just waiting. Once, Logan thought he heard something far off, a low, melodic cry carried by the wind. A howl. It faded quickly, leaving silence that stretched thin and uneasy. That night, Logan lay awake, listening to the wind whisper across the cabin roof. Shadow lay near his bed, and Rex at the door. When the first faint light touched the window, he felt something shift in the air, a peace he hadn't known in years. For the first time since Afghanistan, he had a reason to wake up that wasn't survival. He had two souls depending on him, and one of them, he suspected, was far more extraordinary than he'd imagined. He closed his notebook that morning with a new entry. Shadow, strong appetite, responsive to commands, alert, curious, feels alive in ways I've forgotten to be. Then he added one more line. For the first time, the house has learned how to breathe again. The thaw came slow that year. Snow melted in uneven scars across the hills, leaving patches of frozen mud and the scent of pine sap drifting through the air. Logan Carter stood on the porch with a mug of coffee that had gone lukewarm, watching Shadow stalk something invisible near the tree line. The pup, if it could still be called that, was now the size of a small shepherd, sleek, all muscle and movement. His coat gleamed like polished obsidian under the morning sun. Rex lay nearby, patient and regal, his thick tail sweeping slow arcs across the porch floorboards as his amber eyes followed Shadow's erratic motions with quiet pride. It had been nearly 2 months since the storm. Shadow had learned to open doors, fetch firewood, and track scents through the forest better than Rex himself. He moved differently than any dog Logan had ever seen, low, fluid, purposeful. And when he paused to listen, the whole forest seemed to hush with him. Logan had begun to feel uneasy in ways he couldn't explain. He loved the animal, God he did. But there were moments when he caught something ancient in those eyes, something that did not belong inside a cabin made for men. That morning, Logan was repairing the fence line when a familiar pickup crunched through the slush. Tom Henderson climbed out, his heavy boots sinking an inch into the thawing mud. He wore the same sheepskin coat and the same wry grin, but there was something heavier in his expression, something that said he'd been thinking too much. "Morning, Carter," he called. "You got a minute?" Logan wiped his hands on a rag. "Sure, coffee's inside if you don't mind it stale." "I'll drink anything that isn't out of a thermos," Tom said. He stepped onto the porch, giving Rex a pat, and then stopping short when Shadow appeared behind him, silent as smoke. "Jesus, he's grown." "Tell me about it," Logan muttered. Tom crouched slightly, eyeing Shadow's stance. "You ever see a dog move like that? Look at the shoulders, built like a cougar, and those eyes. They don't blink the way dogs do." Logan didn't answer. He'd been thinking the same thing for days. The vet's early guesses, husky mix, maybe shepherd, felt less convincing by the hour. "He's smart," Logan said finally. "Smarter than most people I know." Tom straightened, brushing mud off his jeans. "Well, smart or not, you might want to get him checked again. Heard from folks in town. Couple of ranchers lost calves the other week. Something big's hunting near the ridge." Logan frowned. "You think—" "I don't think anything yet," Tom interrupted, raising a gloved hand. "Just saying, keep him close. People out here see tracks they don't understand, and they start shooting first." When Tom left, the cabin felt too quiet again. Logan leaned against the railing, watching Shadow nose the wind, tail still. Something out there was calling him, though only he could hear it. That night, Logan dreamed of the desert again. The night his convoy was hit outside Kandahar. The chaos, the radio static, the smell of metal and heat. He woke gasping, chest slick with sweat, Rex pressing against his leg. Shadow stood in the doorway, watching, eyes glowing faintly in the dark. Not with menace, just knowing. Logan rubbed his face, breathing hard. "I'm okay," he whispered, but his voice trembled. By morning, the sky had turned pewter, heavy with sleet. Logan packed both dogs into the truck and drove to town. The clinic bell jingled weakly when he pushed the door open. Dr. Emily Carter looked up from her desk, her auburn hair tied back in a loose braid, half hidden under her winter hat. "Logan," she greeted, a small smile breaking the monotony of her morning. "Shadow again?" "Just a checkup," he said, though the tightness in his shoulders betrayed more. Emily pulled on her gloves. "All right, big guy, let's take a look." Shadow stood still as she examined him, unflinching even when she checked his teeth and ears. When she opened his mouth, she paused. "Good Lord. What?" "These teeth," she murmured, tilting his head toward the light. "They're longer than they should be. Not deformed, perfectly shaped but elongated, and his weight. What did you say he eats?" "Everything," Logan said. "Mostly venison scraps, some kibble. He won't touch chicken." Emily frowned, her hazel eyes narrowing. "Well, whatever it is, it's working. He's growing faster than any domestic breed I've seen." She reached for a vial and drew a small blood sample. "Let me run some tests. Could be something rare. Genetic throwback, maybe." Logan nodded, uneasy. Shadow didn't flinch even when the needle pricked. He simply watched her with that unnerving stillness. Rex, waiting by the door, gave a low whine. "He's protective," Emily said softly, sealing the sample. "Be careful, Logan. Loyalty like that's beautiful, but it can turn dangerous if he ever feels you're threatened." On the drive home, snow began again, soft, steady, relentless. The truck heater wheezed and fogged the windows. Logan glanced at Shadow in the rearview mirror. The animal's head rested on the seat back, golden eyes half closed. Outside, a shape darted across the road, a flash of gray, gone as quickly as it appeared. A wolf, Logan thought, though he'd never seen one in these woods. That evening, as the storm gathered strength, the forest came alive with sounds. Logan was writing in his notebook when Rex's low growl rolled through the cabin. Shadow was already at the door, hackles raised. "Easy," Logan said, standing. But when he looked out, the words caught in his throat. Shapes moved beyond the fence, 5 of them, silhouettes against the snow, gliding like smoke. Wolves, real ones. Shadow's posture changed, not fear, not aggression, something between recognition and command. His head lifted, ears pricked, tail held level. The largest of the wolves stepped forward, gray and scarred, its eyes reflecting the lantern light like twin embers, the 2 locked eyes through the fence. Logan held his breath, one hand on Rex's collar. Then, slowly, Shadow turned, not toward them, but toward Logan. He walked back across the yard, pressed his head against Logan's knee, and sat. The pack lingered for a heartbeat longer before melting back into the dark trees. Logan exhaled. The world outside went still again, except for the whisper of snow against glass. Rex pressed close, trembling faintly, and Shadow leaned against Logan's leg, silent and steady. "What are you, boy?" Logan whispered. Shadow's only answer was a soft, rumbling sound, halfway between a growl and a sigh, a sound that felt like both reassurance and farewell. When morning came, there were prints in the snow, massive, deliberate, circling the fence line. But Shadow was still there, lying by the fire as though nothing had happened. Logan poured himself a cup of coffee, staring out the window. Whatever blood ran in that animal's veins, it had chosen him. And though he didn't understand why, the certainty brought both comfort and dread. He wrote in his notebook that night, "Shadow, encounter with wolves. Did not engage. Returned willingly. Displays restraint. Possibly recognizes kin. Unclear future instincts. Continue observation." He closed the book slowly, the page trembling under his fingers. Something was changing, and he knew it would soon demand a choice. The first real warmth of spring reached the woods in late May, melting the last veins of snow along the pines. Logan Carter stood at the edge of his property, fixing a broken fence post when Rex's deep bark cut through the calm. From the porch, Shadow appeared, now massive, easily 90 pounds, with a sleek black coat that caught the sun like oil. His amber eyes watched the tree line as if he sensed something approaching. Moments later, Logan heard the crunch of tires on the gravel road. Dust lifted into the still air, carrying the sound of engines that didn't belong to neighbors. 2 trucks pulled up. One marked with the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources, the other with the sheriff's emblem. Logan's pulse quickened. He recognized the second vehicle before the door even opened. Tom Henderson, in his faded sheriff's jacket, stepped out first. But the badge was gone, replaced by a grim expression. From the first truck emerged a tall man in his 50s, sharp-featured, clean-shaven, with graying hair combed back in military precision. His posture screamed command even afore he spoke. "Mr. Carter," the man said, voice even but cold. "I'm Officer Ryan Mills, Wildlife Enforcement Division. We've received several reports about a large predatory animal on your property. Mind if we have a look?" Logan wiped his palms on his jeans. "He's not predatory. He's mine." The man's steel-gray eyes flicked toward Shadow, who had stepped off the porch and stood beside Rex, his head level with the German shepherd's shoulders. Ryan's brow tightened. "That's one hell of a dog." "Wolf," Tom said quietly. "He's a wolf, Ryan, not a mix." Logan turned sharply toward his friend. "You told them?" Tom sighed, the lines around his mouth deepening. "I had to, Logan. The video went around. Folks in town are nervous, livestock missing, people seeing black shapes in the timber. They'll come with guns if we don't handle it right." Before Logan could answer, a familiar voice called from the back of the truck. Dr. Emily Carter climbed down, pulling her hair into a ponytail beneath a gray beanie. She wore her field jacket and held a clipboard tight against her chest. Her eyes, kind but tired, met Logan's with something between apology and worry. "I didn't want it to happen this way," she said softly. "But the blood tests confirmed it. Pure wolf. They had to be notified." Logan stared at her. "He's not dangerous." "No," Emily said gently. "But the law doesn't see what I see." Ryan stepped forward. "We're here to relocate him to a sanctuary. You can visit if you want. But keeping a wild animal without a permit is a federal offense." Rex barked sharply, sensing the tension. Shadow didn't move, but his muscles rippled under the fur, tail stiff, posture protective. The air thickened. Logan lifted a hand to calm him. "He's never hurt anyone," Logan said. "He's saved me more times than I can count." Ryan's jaw flexed. "Be that as it may, we still have to remove him." Before anyone could move closer, a voice came from the road behind them. A woman's voice, firm and calm. "No one is removing anything today." A second vehicle approached, an old green pickup with government plates. The driver was a woman in her late 60s, short silver hair tucked under a ranger hat. She wore a tailored brown coat and glasses with gold rims that gleamed in the sun. Her name was Judge Karen Mitchell, retired but still influential in Duluth's small legal circle. She stepped out with the kind of authority that made even Ryan hesitate. "Judge Mitchell?" Ryan asked, surprised. "Yes," she replied smoothly. "I received a call from Sheriff Henderson." She turned to Tom. "You did the right thing, Tom. Let's make sure this ends without anyone getting shot." Then to Logan. "Mr. Carter, I understand you're a veteran?" Logan nodded warily. "Army medic, Afghanistan." She smiled faintly, not kindly but knowingly. "Then I assume you understand the importance of procedure. Let's proceed inside. Somewhere calm, for the animal's sake." Inside the cabin, the air smelled of wood smoke and pine sap. Shadow sat near the window, watching every movement. Rex stayed close to him, a silent reassurance. Emily and Ryan stood near the table while the judge took the seat opposite Logan. She removed her gloves, revealing strong hands lined with age but steady as marble. "I've been briefed," she began. "There are legal precedents, rare but existing, for therapeutic exceptions in cases where a wild animal provides medical or psychological benefit. Mr. Carter, do you have documentation of your service and medical history?" Logan hesitated, then retrieved a folder from a drawer. "VA files," he said. "PTSD diagnosis. I stopped medication 6 months ago. Haven't needed it since Shadow came." Emily nodded. "I can corroborate that. His physiological responses, heart rate, anxiety indicators, they've all improved. I've been monitoring since the rescue. Ryan frowned. Even if true, that doesn't change the biology. He's still a wolf. Karen's gaze was sharp. And yet he's here, alive, integrated, posing no threat. Sometimes the law needs to catch up to reality. Before Ryan could argue, a sound split the air. A deep, guttural snarl from outside. Everyone froze. Through the window, Logan saw movement in the trees. A massive shape lumbered from the shadows. A grizzly, its fur wet, muzzle flecked with foam. It was staggering, wild-eyed, sick, maybe rabid. Ryan cursed, reaching for the tranquilizer rifle. "Back!" he barked. But before the weapon cleared its case, Shadow was gone. Black lightning across the snow. Rex bolted after him. The bear reared up, roaring, but Shadow didn't attack. He stood his ground, teeth bared, body low, voice booming with a primal warning that rattled the window panes. The bear hesitated, confused by the wolf's dominance and the shepherd's flank support. Logan burst out onto the porch, shouting, "Shadow! Rex! Back!" The bear huffed once, pawed the air, then turned and thundered back into the forest, crashing through the undergrowth until the sound faded. For a moment, the world was nothing but wind and heartbeat. When Shadow returned, his fur bristled, breath heavy but calm. He walked to Logan, pressed his massive head against the man's chest, and exhaled as if to say, "It's done." Logan wrapped his arms around the creature's neck, whispering, "Good boy. You saved them." Ryan lowered his rifle, shaking his head in disbelief. "That bear could have killed us." "Could have," Karen said evenly, "but didn't, thanks to him." She turned to Ryan. "I think we have our precedent." By late afternoon, papers were signed. A compromise. Shadow would remain under Logan's care under a special wildlife-assisted therapy permit, subject to regular inspections and strict liability. It was fragile, unconventional, but it was enough. As the trucks pulled away, Emily lingered last. She placed a hand on Logan's arm. "Be careful," she said softly. "He's loyal to you. That kind of bond is powerful and unpredictable." Logan nodded, glancing toward the porch where Shadow and Rex lay side by side in the last light. "So am I," he said. The wind carried the scent of rain through the valley, and for the first time, Logan felt that maybe peace wasn't something given. It was something fought for and guarded, just like this strange, wild family he had built. The next winter came early to Duluth, silent and sure. The first flakes began to fall before the leaves had finished turning, and by November, Logan Carter's cabin sat again beneath a quilt of white. It had been 6 months since the confrontation with the wildlife officers, and though the paperwork had piled high, peace had returned in its quiet northern way. Logan had learned to live by new rhythms. Inspections once a month, fences repaired before dusk, food stored in steel bins. But the land had become more than a home again. It was a shared ground between man and beasts, stitched together by the long patience of routine. Shadow had grown into a creature of breathtaking strength, nearly 120 pounds now, his coat black as wet earth, his eyes bright and alive like twin embers. Yet for all his size, he moved with the same soft precision he'd shown as a pup. Rex, now grayer around the muzzle, was slower but still dignified, content to watch from the porch as Shadow bounded through the snowdrifts. Logan often found himself watching them both, realizing how easily their presence had become the pulse of his life. The inspections were formalities now, though Logan still prepared like a soldier expecting a surprise inspection. When Officer Ryan Mills returned that December, the air between them carried a wary respect. The officer's posture was as rigid as ever, but his tone had softened. He brought a young wildlife intern this time, a woman in her late 20s named Clara Hayes. She was tall and spare, with cropped blonde hair under her fur-lined cap and the careful curiosity of someone trained to observe before speaking. Her eyes, a cool gray blue, missed nothing. "Mr. Carter," she said, her gloved hand firm when they shook. "I've read the case file. Hard to believe you live with a wolf." "Harder to believe he lives with me," Logan said, smiling faintly. Clara laughed, brief but genuine. "I'm just here to document behavior. You can pretend I'm not around." Ryan raised an eyebrow. "She doesn't mean that. She'll ask questions until you regret letting us in." The visit passed smoothly. Clara took notes as Shadow paced the perimeter, pausing every few steps to glance toward the woods beyond the fence. "He's alert," she murmured, "but not anxious. It's like he's monitoring." "He is," Logan said. "It's his job. Mine too." After they left, the cabin returned to its quiet. Snow deepened. Days shortened. Logan fell into the rhythm again. Feed the dogs, split the wood, write a few notes in his worn notebook, the one that had grown thicker each season. He had stopped thinking of it as record-keeping. It was closer to prayer. Then came January. The blizzard arrived without warning, a wall of white swallowing the valley by afternoon. The sky bruised dark, wind screaming off Lake Superior. Logan secured the shutters, filled the stove, and called both dogs in from the yard. Rex came first, shaking, snow from his fur. But Shadow didn't follow. Logan opened the door, wind slashing his face like shards of glass. "Shadow!" he shouted into the storm. Nothing. Only the whine of snow against the trees. Panic rose like a tide. He grabbed his parka and rifle and stepped into the storm, Rex pressing close to his leg. The woods were a blur of motionless ghosts. Logan's boots sank deep, each step heavier than the last. He followed the tracks, massive paw prints heading toward the ridge where the old fence line ended. They stopped near a fallen pine. Logan crouched, heart hammering. The snow smelled of iron. Blood. He raised his head, scanning the trees, and froze. In the near distance stood two men in hunting gear. Strangers. One was young, broad-shouldered, his orange cap pulled low. The other, older, rail-thin with a grizzled beard and hard eyes that glinted with arrogance. They had a snowmobile parked nearby, and between them, caught in the crossfire of the world's oldest misunderstanding, stood Shadow. The younger man lowered his rifle slowly. "Holy hell," he muttered. "That's him. The black one people been talking about." "Don't just stand there," the older man snapped. "Take the shot. Wolves have been hitting stock all winter. You think I'm losing another calf to that thing?" "Wait!" Logan's voice cracked the air like a gunshot. He raised his arms, stepping forward. "That's my animal." Both hunters turned. The younger hesitated, but the older's eyes narrowed. "Your animal? You saying you keep a wolf penned up out here?" "He's licensed," Logan said through the wind. "Therapy animal. You fire that gun. You're breaking federal law." The old man scoffed. "Law don't mean a damn thing when it's your livestock bleeding in the snow." The younger man wavered. "Bill, he's not attacking. Look at him. He's just standing there." Shadow hadn't moved. His head was low, eyes flicking between Logan and the hunters, assessing, choosing. Rex barked once, sharp and urgent, and Logan saw it, the split second where the older hunter's hand tightened on the trigger. Logan didn't think. He moved. The shot cracked through the storm, deafening. Snow burst from the tree beside him. Shadow lunged, not at the men, but in front of Logan, a black wall of fur and muscle that took the next bullet squarely in the shoulder. The younger man screamed. Rex charged forward, barking furiously. The older hunter stumbled, falling backward into the drift. "Drop the gun!" Logan roared, his own rifle leveled now. The young man obeyed instantly. The older one froze, face pale. "He's hit!" the boy shouted, pointing at Shadow, who had collapsed into the snow, breathing raggedly. Logan's body moved on instinct, training overriding terror. He dropped to his knees, pressing his hand over the wound. Warm blood seeped through his gloves. "Stay with me," he whispered, voice breaking. "You're all right, buddy. Stay with me." The storm roared louder, but Logan didn't care. He wrapped his parka around Shadow, lifting with everything he had. Rex trotted beside them, whining softly, as Logan staggered back toward the cabin. Behind him, the younger hunter shouted apologies that were lost to the wind. Hours blurred into eternity. Inside, the cabin became a field hospital. Towels, stitching kit, the smell of alcohol and blood. Logan's hands shook but never faltered. Emily's training echoed in his memory. Pressure first. Keep them breathing. By dawn, Shadow's breathing steadied, shallow but strong. When he opened his eyes again, the storm had passed. Gray light filled the room. Shadow lifted his head weakly, tail thumping once against the floor. Logan's vision blurred with tears. "You stubborn miracle," he murmured. Later that week, Judge Karen Mitchell herself drove up the icy road, news already spreading through town. The hunters had reported the shooting, claiming self-defense, but witnesses told another story. The boy's guilt had gotten the better of him. He'd confessed the truth. The wolf had never attacked. Karen stood by the fire, her small frame dwarfed by her heavy winter coat. "You understand, Logan," she said quietly. "This could have ended differently. The state's not fond of loopholes." "I know," he said, "but he's alive. That's enough." Karen looked toward the sleeping wolf and the shepherd curled beside him. "Maybe you've proved something we forgot, that loyalty isn't exclusive to our kind." When she left, dusk had fallen. Logan stepped onto the porch, the sky washed in the last light of day. Snow whispered underfoot. Inside, Shadow stirred, eyes catching the glow of the fire. Rex lifted his head and sighed. Logan breathed deep and smiled faintly. "We're still here," he said into the night, "and we're staying." Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled. Shadow's ears twitched, but he didn't answer. For the first time, he didn't need to. When the snow settled that final winter, and the cabin lights burned warm against the endless white, Logan Carter finally understood something he'd missed for years. Miracles don't always arrive with thunder or choirs. Sometimes they come on four legs, with amber eyes and a heart willing to bleed for yours. Shadow's survival wasn't just chance. It was grace, something that doesn't ask to be explained, only received. Logan looked at the wolf resting beside the fire, Rex's head on his paw, the two breathing in rhythm like one spirit made from three. He whispered a quiet prayer, not for himself, but for every lost soul still walking through their own winter. "Thank you, Lord," he said, voice trembling, "for not giving up on broken men." And maybe that's what the story was always about. Not about taming the wild, but learning that love itself is the wildest miracle God ever made. We're all a little lost, a little scarred, but even in the coldest season, something greater watches over us. Sometimes he sends angels. Sometimes he sends wolves. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to remember the miracles that walk quietly beside you, your loyal pets, your family, your faith, your second chances. Comment below what shadow means to you. Share this story so someone else might find their own reason to hope again. Subscribe to the channel for more stories of loyalty, redemption, and the unseen grace of God, working through the smallest acts of love. May the Lord bless you and keep you safe through every storm you face. Amen.